For those of us who've had the privilege of getting to do the work, one of the most frustrating elements is the inability to bring others along on that experience. You just think, man, if I could only have so-and-so on this flight, if they could only see what I got to see today, how great would that be? And so I have long had a passion for telling the story of MAF's work.
So for people who don't know about MAF, Mission Aviation Fellowship, I'm talking now with David Holsten. He's kind of at the center of the new documentary coming out this month called Ends of the Earth. First, for people who might not be familiar, David, at all with Mission Aviation Fellowship, can you give us kind of the elevator pitch of what it is that y'all do?
Yeah, sure. So MAF has been around for 76 years now. We were founded right after the conclusion of World War II. There were some newly trained pilots who were also believers who came together and said, is there a way that we could utilize these newfound skills to really serve the kingdom? And that was the beginning of the organization. Our first pilot, Betty Green, who's actually mentioned in the documentary, flew a number of different places around the world with us. And the organization really started out in its early days serving the transportation and logistical needs of missionaries who are in remote parts of the world. Throughout the decades, our user base has kind of evolved to really include a lot more of the people who are from the countries where we're serving. And so it could be government workers, it may be serving a remote village with things that they need to develop that community. It could be national pastors or evangelists, which you see a pretty compelling picture of in the film as well. And so really most of our user base now, and the number of different countries that we fly in over 20 different countries. Most of those passengers are from the countries where we live and serve. And we just use the airplane as a tool that can reach places that are really hard to get to, places where an infrastructure has not been developed yet that allows people to travel with surface-based transportation, or because of insecurity that may be present due to conflicts that are going on. We're able to just, get over all of that stuff with our aircraft and get them to a location where they need to go. And then kind of the last, element that's pretty significant in what we do are medevac flights. So we oftentimes are using our aircraft like a flying ambulance to get people to medical care as quickly as we possibly can.
So much in mission work, a criticism you often hear that I've heard over the years is, well, we're going to send Americans over and they're going to do all the work and then they're going to leave. But you talk about how you kind of equip the indigenous people who are from that area, teaching them and giving them resources, and then saying, look, this is on you now to carry this forward. How does that work? How has that looked for MAF to live out that process and that style of ministry?
Yeah, so I think really from our inception, we have had to rely on partnerships with those who are from the places where we serve. And in today's MAF, of our, we have about 600 employees working, around the world. 300 of them, half of our employee base, are nationals from the countries where we serve. And we simply could not do the work that we do without their help. So not only are they our customers, so to speak, where we're flying them to places that they need to go, but they are part of the MAF family as well. They are mechanics that are helping us repair our aircraft. They are flight schedulers, people who are involved in high levels of government relations that help to secure the permissions for us to serve where we are. So this sort of paradigm that would say, we come with all of the answers, all the resources, we'll take care of this, is completely unrealistic in our world. It just doesn't work that way. And it really hasn't for many decades. We have had to work right alongside of our brothers and sisters who are from the places where we serve And I love that. I mean, I think that that's a picture of the body of Christ. That's how we have to function. And there's actually been, I think, there's been, I think great harm has been done. This is my opinion, but from a missional mindset that says, that's very short-term related. I'm not talking about short-term missions. I'm talking about somebody who comes and they say, okay, we have planted this church, our work is done, we're out of here. And the reality is that if you take away the source of ongoing instruction and a mature spiritual perspective, which in some situations, that's the missionary that brings that and is helping to disciple people. If that is quickly taken away, what you can have is a regression in spiritual maturity, and in a place that was technically reached becomes really kind of unreached again. And so we've seen this happen. And I think the unique thing about MAF's work is we work in this realm of seeking to address physical and spiritual needs that are just, they never go away. They just are always there. So we really see our work as, I think it's going to be around until Christ returns. It's just one of those things that there will always be medical emergencies. There's always going to be conflict that creates challenges for transportation. There's an ongoing need for, just transportation in general. So that kind of bakes it into our world where we need to have the long view in mind. And that means we partner with people wherever we are, and we walk with them on that.
In the West, I think we have an embarrassment of riches, and I think we forget that sometimes, that we have access to airports and we've got paved roads, and we forget how necessary transportation is. So y'all are providing a necessary service to help advance the gospel in these remote areas. So in meeting that physical need, I imagine that's probably a great deal of how you establish trust with people who otherwise don't know you from Adam. So tell me a little bit about the importance of establishing trust and relationship before you just proselytize to people.
Oh, yeah, great question. And I couldn't agree more. I think that, look at the model of Jesus's ministry where he invites people to follow him, right? It's this simple invitation, follow me. And you don't see the disciples getting it all figured out right away, right? I mean, there's this ongoing maturing, and it takes time, and there's relationship, and there's growth in that relationship. And this sort of mindset that says we're gonna show up and just say something that's compelling, or maybe meet a really short-term need, and that's sufficient. I think that there's a lot of potential danger in that. And so we have the way that MAF typically serves, just because of the sort of work that we do, there's this process of beginning to serve a village. Often, in the past, that could mean, working with people to build an airstrip to help guide them. You actually see a picture of that, a story of that in this documentary. That can take a lot of time and a lot of guidance. And then once you have this portal for service that is opened up, so to speak, then you begin to respond to a medical emergency that may take place. That's oftentimes some of the first calls you'll get. All of a sudden, a village realizes, wait, we've got an option now that we didn't have before. There could be building supplies that come in that allow for a new structure to be constructed. There may be food supplies that can now come in that address a shortfall of those supplies that may be present. There's medicine that may be able to come in. And what you find is these things that in the West, we just take it for granted. I mean, you just get in your car and you drive down to Walmart and you take care of it. That is a foreign concept to the people that we serve. These things are so time consuming, so costly. And so to be able to come alongside of somebody and help to deliver the things that are really needed by them. It not only does it meet the need, but it's sort of there's something that happens relationally in that, where somebody is now caring for me. They're doing something that is important and greatly needed by me, and it bonds you in this unique sort of way because they've come to rely on you. And I think I've loved that about the work that I've gotten to be a part of throughout the years. I mean, when you have this beautiful privilege of coming in, using an airplane to pick up somebody who is literally dying because of something going on, and you pick them up and you take them out to where they can get better medical care. Maybe they have an operation, or they are able to procure the treatment that they need. And then you get to fly them back into their village, maybe a month later, 2 months later, and they're healed and they're doing better. Every time you go back to that place, there's this warmth of relationship where they're like, hey, this is the person who helped me out. And I mean, I saw that happen many times. That creates trust. They see that you're committed to my well-being, that you love me, you care for me. And that opens doors for then those deeper spiritual conversations that take place. So I think it's a sound strategy. I think you do need to continue to be intentional and say, I don't just want to perpetually just do nice things for people. I mean, that's important. So we need to be intentional to say, okay, here's an opportunity now. Let's talk about something else even. But it does go quite a long ways towards creating an ability to have a more winsome, trusting approach, I think, to sharing the gospel that really is addressing kind of the whole man, so to speak, that they care about all of my needs, educational, how I'm marginalized in society, whatever it may be. We get to work with people who are addressing all of those things.
Yeah, and in watching the documentary, there's so much of that is on display. You see so many. I think more than anything, the takeaway for me in watching the film is the relationship building, the relationship that MAF builds with so many people around the world in all the different countries that you've ministered to, with people who probably, aside from their village or their community or their family, never felt seen by the world, by the outside world. And, you're giving them that gift as a Christian. And I want to ask about the documentary. How did that come about? Why did y'all decide to jump in and tell this story now?
Well, for those of us who've had the privilege of getting to do the work, I think we mentioned, our family, we were in Indonesia for about 17 years. So I got to fly to I'm flying the same aircraft and going to the same places that you see in the documentary. I had that privilege of doing that. And when you get to be a part of something like that, one of the most frustrating elements is the inability to bring others along on that experience, to be able to immerse, whether it's a supporting church or a family member or a friend or somebody who's back in the States. You just think, man, if I could only have so-and-so on this flight, if they could only see what I got to see today, how great would that be? And so I have long had a passion for telling the story of MAF's work, and have sort of wrestled with a perpetual frustration of how effectively I could do that. At the same time, our marketing team here at MAF is always seeking to innovate around how can we bring people deeper into the story of MAF. And so we have typically focused on shorter pieces. Maybe it's a 3-minute video that we put on our website, or it's a blog post or something like that. But all of these are quite condensed. And I think for a long time, there's been this percolating desire to do a more expansive job of telling that story, knowing with confidence that the work that we do can carry the weight of that storytelling. I mean, it's a unique enough sort of thing that we're involved in. It's far enough outside of kind of the average person's experience. It's just compelling by virtue of that. And so we've always thought, man, if we could just tell this story on a larger scale, so to speak, and really give it the the space that's needed to tell it more completely, how great would that be? And so I think that was kind of the genesis of the idea. And then as we got together, I came back about three and a half years ago to move into this role. And so we started talking about that pretty soon and, afterwards, and we've been working on it about 3 years. We thought we knew the story that was going to be told, and that completely was upended. And, that's part of what goes with telling a documentary. It's said that in a normal film, the director is God, but in a documentary, God is the director. And so that wordplay has made a ton of sense for us as we've seen kind of what's transpired around the world and within our own organization over the last year and a half. And so we wanted to be flexible to tell the story that needed to be told with authenticity and transparency. And I think we landed on that. I think that, the Lord has directed the steps of everybody who's been working on that, and a really powerful story that was completely unscripted, in terms of, it's just, this is what happened during that time frame. And it's a pretty amazing story, really.
Yeah, it is. And it's a testament, I think, to the ministry, but it's also a testament to the fact that as believers, we know that God created us to be creators, right? He created us to be storytellers, and that's how we connect with each other best, is through narrative and through story. So I think it's such a cool ministry opportunity to be able to give people a window in to what MAF has been doing for so long. And even though y'all have been around for, you said 70 years, there's some people who just had never heard of MAF and aren't aware of all that you're doing. So I think it's a great opportunity for people to learn more. But you mentioned that you said there are so many people that you wish you could bring along on the trip, and that's part of the motivation for the documentary. Can you tell me just how over the years MAF and the work that y'all have been doing has changed you and challenged your faith and your family's faith?
Well, it's probably a natural thing for a family who's going into cross-cultural ministry early on. You've been equipped, you have this strong sense of calling, you have a number of individuals and churches that are standing behind you to support you. And so you head overseas and you think, okay, I've got this idea of what I'm going to do and I'm prepared to go do it. And then you bump up against reality. and your perception of what you thought life and ministry was going to be comprised of is perhaps really turned on its head. And, it can be things like, I thought I was going to come to help this individual or minister to this person. And here I am, they are pouring into my life, and I am sitting at their feet, so to speak, learning all sorts of things. And I saw that repeated numerous times, whether it was an MAF employee, one of the, we'd serve all these different national pastors who served interior, and getting to work with them, seeing some of the missionaries that we were able to serve, and just their level of commitment, like Tim and Rebecca, who are in the documentary. They're good friends, and I've had meals with them in their home. And these guys have committed themselves to this life, literally up on top of a mountain in a little cabin that they're living in, and they're pouring their lives out to minister to a people group of about 1,000 people. And this is like their life's commitment. And you can't be in the midst of that without it changing you, and you just think, okay, I thought I was committed, but actually, as I get to interact with these other individuals, you're challenged in that way. And, I think as I reflect on the work that we do, the journey that we've been on with MAF has given me such a higher level of gratitude and I think affection for the gospel than what I think I ever would have had. I've had this opportunity to be in a village where the gospel has been understood and embraced and it affects the things, I mean, just things like how the children will interact with you, the sort of, there's a visceral feel in the location of a sense of peace, perhaps, or just a sense of care that people have for each other. I could then get into the airplane, take off, and at about 3 minutes later, I'm on the other side of a valley, landing in a location where there was no gospel awareness yet. And you get out of the airplane, and there's almost this palatable sense of darkness. There is active signs of abusive relationships. There's a lack of peace. There's a sense of tribal conflict that's going on, and it's jarring. You know, the dichotomy that can exist between two places like that, and I think just having this appreciation that, you know, honestly, there's things in mission aviation that don't make a lot of sense in the eyes of the world. I mean, these are expensive pieces of equipment. There's unique risk that you're taking on, and you're going to do it for these little small people groups that are scattered throughout this mountainous region in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And there's people who would look at that and go, that's not a very good return on the investment. I mean, I think you could do a lot better if you pour those funds into this, you know, urban setting here or this type of ministry. But, you know, we serve a Savior who is willing to go after the one lost sheep. And that's the world that MAF lives in. We live in the world of that one. and we get to be a part of utilizing the skills and talents and the tools that God has given us to reach that one lost sheep, so to speak, that's in the form of this one little isolated tribe somewhere. And I love that. I mean, I love that that's something that is close to our Savior's heart. He loves the marginalized. He seeks the people who are on the fringes, and the gospel brings hope to those people. It brings hope to them, and it's countercultural to the world. It doesn't make sense to the world. It's foolishness to the world. But I have come to have just this growing affection for it and love for it, and to appreciate what it does to radically change people's lives and to usher them into a kingdom that brings hope. And that's the good work that we get to do.
Yeah. And, you know, I think whenever you go through a trial, or you're adapting to something that's completely foreign to you and is brand new, God has a way of I guess, expanding your ability, right, through the Holy Spirit, or teaching you that the gospel is a whole lot more robust than maybe you sometimes think it is. But you know, I want to ask about, kind of in that vein, about comfort and about giving up comfort and being willing to sacrifice comfort to do what you and your family did and has done. As a Westerner, that's a difficult thing to do. Like, I'm thinking, like, I don't know that I'd want to, if I would be willing to give up all of my comforts, you know, or sacrifice them potentially, to serve. So how have you been able to balance that? Has that been something that was or is difficult?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a level of difficulty to it. I mean, at the same time, we don't ask people to give up all the comforts that they were used to. We think it's a worthwhile investment to have, you know, to try to have a home that somebody can come home to at the end of the day and feel safe and be able to relax in. So, I mean, that's part of what we invest our funds into, is to help have staff housing that is not just the bare kind of subsistence level, but is a place that they actually can raise their family in and say, no, I can see myself living here for the foreseeable future. So that's kind of a balancing act. And there's, you know, different organizations kind of have different philosophies around that, but we have generally tried to, at a reasonable level, try to have some of the things that help people to go the distance, right? So we work to have an internet connection, and people can maintain a connection to their home country, or they can, you know, that feels kind of like a necessity in today's world. You know, so we want to compensate them at a reasonable level that allows them to have a decent standard of living wherever they are in the world. So we don't just push all that stuff away. But at the same time, there's definitely sacrifices that take place. I mean, you're not going to have the accessibility to medical care that those of us in the Western world are accustomed to.
Sure.
There were times where we needed to change up our plans for how we were schooling our kids when there wasn't a teacher that was available, and we needed to quickly pivot and homeschool this year, and you only had a short period of time to prepare for that. There's funerals that we missed out on. There's weddings that we missed out on. There's holidays with family that we didn't get to have with them in person because we were living on the other side of the world. So there are those sacrifices. I think what helped us is anytime I would go, I would fly interior and I would find myself in a village context, because most of our families, we live in an urban setting and we are based out of there, and then we fly into airstrips that are scattered throughout the jungle or the mountains or whatever. When you go to those places and you get out and you're sitting in a very kind of primitive house that a tribal member is sitting in, or you get into those locations where there is no electricity, and when the sun goes down, it's time to go to bed because everything's gotten dark or whatever. I'll tell you, that you would regain your perspective, and all of a sudden the life that we were living back in the city seemed very, very comfortable. So it's kind of a moving target on what you're used to, but we just found that by far the benefits of living that life, the experiences that our family had, that our children grew up in, the community that surrounded us, the benefits of that far exceeded the cost and the sacrifice, I think. So we just look back on it and we go, yeah, there was some tough stuff, but actually we got used to it, and it's okay. There's people who live in a lot worse circumstances, and they still thrive in it, and that was convicting. And so there's sacrifice, but it's worth it. The stuff that we get to do, it's worth it. And we were willing to do it.
And I mean, the joy that you're able to bring people by meeting not only their immediate physical needs, which some of them probably imagined would never be met, but then also meeting their spiritual needs is certainly a benefit that far outweighs the momentary sacrifices, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask, you've been generous with your time, so I just want to ask the last question for you is, what's the takeaway that you hope people walk out of the theater with when they see the ends of the earth this weekend?
Well, I think for us, we're going to feel like this project, as long as it's taken and what we've needed to invest in it, that it will have been worth it if our audience watches this film and they really, they have to ask this question of, what does this mean to me? What does this mean to me? Based upon what I've seen, and now I have a better understanding of the work of missions that's going on around the world. What is my role in the Great Commission? I think that's a question that we all have to ask. I have interacted with people before at churches or wherever, and they've said, "Oh, I'm so glad you do that. I could never do that." And they sort of write themselves out of the equation. But I don't think the Bible gives us that luxury. I don't think the teaching of Christ is selective in saying to his disciples, "Go into the world and make disciples and teach them to obey everything I've commanded you." I mean, this is a calling that all of us have to wrestle with. Now, not everybody's going to go, and even Christ, his closest disciples, some stayed in Jerusalem, others went beyond that, but they all had a role. There had to be some role that you have. And are you praying for this work with a new level of intentionality? Are you considering, what could it look like for me to maybe go do this sort of work? Or do I want to support the work of others who are doing this? I think we all have to wrestle with that. I think that's the takeaway. We want people to watch this and wrestle with that question with a new sense of urgency. And I think it's an important question to wrestle with at this particular moment in time, where there's been so much of an inward focus on kind of our own protection, our own safety. How do I, kind of insulate myself from what's going on? It's gotten pretty tribalistic, so to speak, as we go into different camps. And I just think that the way of Jesus calls us to look beyond ourselves, and that we just have to look beyond the world that we're in and consider the world that is out there. And I hope that that's what people do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just listening to that. It's a convicting answer, but it's also it's a good reminder, right? Because it's not, as a believer, it's not a question of if you belong in the story of sharing the gospel. It's where in the story do I fit? What role do I play, into what capacity? Because the body is made up of every part of, just like our bodies. There are so many different parts of the body, and they all serve a valuable role. Just because you think it doesn't work doesn't mean it's not working. All these different roles are necessary. I'm grateful for the role that MAF plays, and for the work that y'all are doing. And I sincerely hope people who are watching this at Faithwire and CBN News will go to the theater and see this documentary, because it's truly inspiring. And let me just ask you really quick, for anybody who wants more information about MAF, they might want to donate or get involved. How can they do that?
Yeah, I mean, our website, maf.org, is the easiest place to go to do that. We've actually will have a QR code that comes up after the documentary as well, that somebody could just scan with their phone, and it'll take them to that same location. So that's where we're going to be inviting people to really begin a journey with us. If their heart is stirred to get involved in a new way, that QR code at the end of the documentary will kind of be the start of that journey of what that can look like for them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for speaking with us at Faithwire. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.